Good evening. I sincerely welcome all the participants and all my seniors and other attendants. I also welcome Sri Vishwapriya on behalf of my legal speak team, who is going to give today's presentation on the topic of abuse of dominant position under the Competition Act 2002. She is a fresh law graduate. She is yet to enroll as an advocate. She has completed her schooling in Balavidya Mandir Adaya. She has completed her law course in VIT School of Law. She has participated during his law course in several national conferences, also in moot court competitions. She has a lot of love and passion in music also. We all know she is a daughter of our good friend T. Ramesh. We, our legal team, speak team, wishes her all the best and also wish her all success in her future bright career. Over to Shri Vishwapriya for her presentation. Continue.
Uh,
Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you so much, sir, for that warm welcome. So, good evening, everybody. I'm Sri Vishwapriya. I'm T. Ramesh's daughter. So, I just recently graduated. I just recently completed my law degree. And I'm very nervous today to be presenting in front of all of you. It's the first time making a presentation, a debut of sorts before the legal fraternity. So, I'm very thankful for this opportunity provided by Jayachandran sir and Mudimanan sir and his entire team for giving me this opportunity and platform. So the topic that I've taken is abuse of dominant position. So this was basically a research paper that I did back in college. So I'll quickly go through a quick run through of my presentation. So first of all, I want to cover what is competition very briefly. Then I will move on to the Competition Act 2002. Why does it exist? And what is dominant position and how is it determined by law? And within that, we have certain parameters to determine dominant position. So there is a relevant market and how that relevant market is determined. And there is also a test for dominance. So once a relevant market is defined, whether a particular enterprise or a company is actually dominant or has a position of strength in that particular market. And finally, I'll move on to what is abuse of dominance and the various factors that determine abuse of dominance. And what are the consequences of abuse of dominant position as given by law. And I've also I also found out some lacunas in the law. So I will be discussing that from my point of view. So that will be the layout of my presentation. So I'll move on to what is competition. So Black's Law Dictionary defines competition as a struggle between rivals for the same trade at the same time. So even in common parlance, competition means rivalry, where two or more people fight it out to see who's the best. So in common parlance also, there is a element of rivalry in that. So even under this Black Law's Dictionary definition, there's a struggle between rivals for the same trade at the same time. So what does it mean when there is a competition in the market? So competition in the market means competition amongst the competitors in order to attract customers. So there are several market forces like you have threat of new entrants, you have threat of substitutability of a product. So there might be many players in the market and they will give you a competition or a run for your money because they might have similar goods or they might be offering similar services at competitive prices, etc., etc. So what are the barriers to competition? So if you see the barriers of competition, usually in a perfect competition and market scenario, all players are equal and it benefits the consumer at the end of the day. So if there was no competition, only few companies would have monopoly or oligopoly over a particular sector of the market. So that would be detrimental to free competition or free trade. So in order to prevent abuse of that, the competition law has been enacted. So it seeks to curtail any form of unfair behavior or behavior of companies who seek to dominate the market and they try to influence the competitors or they try to push out competitors from the market. So that is the basic agenda of the Competition Act. So from that, I've picked out the Section 4, that is abuse of dominant position. So the Competition Act 2002 was enacted in order to provide a legal framework to regulate the competition in India. So it has several objectives. So I've just picked out the objectives that are relevant to abuse of dominant position. So one is in order to prevent anti-competitive practices. And second is to promote and protect free and fair competition. And ultimately, when they do that, they will protect the interests of the consumers as well. So the Competition Act also lays down the procedure for the establishment of a regulatory authority, which is called the Competition Commission of India. So this Competition Commission of India is where the investigation of abuse of dominance or investigation of anti-competitive practices take place. So moving on, what is dominant position? So the first time dominant position was defined by law was in the case of United Brands versus Commission. So this was a European Court of Justice case. So this was decided in the year 1978. So they defined dominance as a position of economic strength enjoyed by an undertaking which enables it to prevent effective competition being maintained on the relevant market by affording it the power to behave to an appreciable extent independently of its competitors, its customers, and ultimately of its consumers. So the important keywords that need to be taken out from this definition is dominance is a position of economic strength. Second, it gives the ability to a company to prevent effective competition. So, and the third key point is relevant market, in that particular market where the product or service is being sold. So it when all these three gives it a power to influence its competitors and customers and ultimately its consumers as well. So to safeguard all this is why the Competition Act 2002 was enacted. So almost the definition of dominant position under the Competition Act has been taken from the decision in the United Brands case by the European Court of Justice. So it is being defined as a position of strength enjoyed by an enterprise in the relevant market in India, which enables it to operate independently of competitive forces prevailing in the relevant market, or affect its competitors or consumers or the relevant market in its own favor. So it's able to use its position of economic strength to influence market in its favor. So a similar definition has been adopted. So how is abuse of dominant position determined? So dominant position is basically a company's ability to influence the market. So it can restrict the market, it can restrict competition. So it acts as a barrier to free competition or free trade. So how is abuse of dominant position determined? So first step in determining abuse of dominant position is to define or constrain the market within which the anti-competitive practice is happening. So first is determination of the relevant market. So there are several factors that have to be considered before determining this relevant market, and the powers have been given to the CCI for determining that. That is, CCI is the Competition Commission of India. So once the relevant market, the boundaries within which the competition has been determined, we move on to the CCI then checks whether the company has a dominant position in that relevant market. Again, so dominant position is also being given by several factors. It can be market share, the size of the competitors, etc. So I will be dealing with that later on as I move on. And thirdly, if the company is in a dominant position, next the CCI has to check whether there's abuse of that dominant position. So abuse of the dominant position is when it influences or uses that position of strength to influence the competition. So then thirdly, the last step is if the answer to whether there is abuse of such dominant position is yes, the company it can be concluded that the company or their enterprise or that undertaking is abusing that dominant position in that relevant market. So how is relevant market determined? So relevant market is determined by the CCI. So the CCI has been given powers to determine the relevant market. So it varies based on it varies on a case-to-case basis. So it's not very determining it's not very easy to to put it into certain borders or to restrict the relevant market. So you can't just follow a simple theoretical definition in order to determine the relevant market. So there are also several factors that you need to take into consideration, because the relevant market can vary on a case-to-case basis. So I'll be discussing some cases which will be easier to understand. So one is whether a firm is in a dominant position is determined in the context of a relevant market. So a relevant market has been defined under section 2 subclause R of the Competition Act, which means the market, so relevant market is basically decided based on two factors. It comprises of a relevant product market and also a relevant geographic market. So the relevant market is the market in which the competition takes place. So like I said, the scope of relevant market cannot be limited easily. So the CCA has to go into what is the relevant product market and within which area that relevant product market is being sold. So both relevant product market and the geographic market play an important role in deciding or setting the boundaries of a relevant market. So since each case gives a new or unique interpretation, there is a variation in what relevant market means. So first of all, why is it important that you determine relevant competition? So this is a Supreme Court case where the Competition Commission of India versus Coordination Committee of Artists and Technicians of West Bengal Films and Television. So in this case, the Supreme Court has stated that the objective of defining a market is in order to identify the actual competitors that exist in that market, and those competitors, whether they are able to restrict this particular enterprise from engaging in anti-competitive practices or influencing competitive pressure on the other firms, other competitors that exist in the same market. So that is the importance of why relevant market must be identified. Then, what is relevant product market? So a relevant product market, it comprises of all those products which can be used interchangeably. So this is basically a concise definition of what is being given in the section 2 subclause C of the Competition Act, which are regarded as means a market comprising all those products or services which are regarded as interchangeable or substitutable by the consumer by reason of characteristics of the products or service, their prices and intended use. So relevant product market is defined in terms of substitutability. So how easily can one product be switched with another company's product? So the Act provides for several factors that the CCI must consider before making a decision on the relevant market. So section 19 subclause 7 gives the several lists the factors which must be considered for defining the relevant product market. So first is physical characteristics or end use of goods. So physical characteristics as in, for example, I will give you a case. Suppose you're going for, I'll give you an example. For example, you're going for a super sports car. So a super sports car can be easily differentiated from a normal sedan. So take a Lamborghini, which is a super sports car. Or if you compare that with Hyundai, there is a vast difference in the physical characteristics or the end use of goods. So a Hyundai car may be used for day-to-day purposes, whereas you can't take a Lamborghini out every day. So the CCA in one case where in Exclusive Motors versus Automobili Lamborghini, it has stated that the market for super sports cars, it constitutes a separate market because it has different characterizations of price and it has a different intended use. So then the second factor to be considered is the price of the goods or services. So there might be different products, the same product may be offered with different prices, or the service that may be offered at different prices. So that should also be considered while defining a relevant product market. And third is the consumer preference. Fourth is exclusion of in-house production. So in-house production meaning there might be a company, I would just follow with the Lamborghini case again. So the Lamborghini company might produce a product which is a unit specifically only for their cars. So they might not put that out on the open market, which might be exclusive to their production. So that should also be considered. And fifth is the existence of specialized producers. So there might be specialized producers. For example, if you take the example of tourism, it is a specific product which is being marketed. So they are very distinct from the other products that are being offered in the market. So these tourism can constitute a separate market as such. So classification of the final factor that is to be considered is classification of industrial products. So the government itself has notified certain industries. So there is a national industrial classification code which segregates economic activities into industries. For example, agriculture, forest, fishing. So the CCI can make references to these classifications also. So the CCI also has been given the power to either take one of these factors into consideration, or they can take all of these factors into consideration. I'll move on to how to determine relevant geographic market. So section 2, subclass S of the Competition Act of 2002 defines relevant geographic market. So a relevant geographic market, it comprises of all those regions or areas where buyers would be able or willing to find substitutes for products in question. So again, this has also been defined in terms of interchangeability or substitutability. So suppose there is a wide distribution network where people can easily obtain goods even from, so suppose we're living in Chennai and it is easy for us to acquire products from say Delhi or Gurgaon. So even then, if the costs of procuring that particular product, the transportation costs, etc., are low, it can be easily substituted for what can be bought in Chennai. So that is also that is simply relevant geographic market defined in terms of substitutability. So section 19 subclause 6 gives the various factors that the CCI must consider. The first is regulatory trade barriers. So there might be certain competitors who prohibit entry of products. So second is local specification requirements. So products may be differentiated on the basis of their use. So for example, if you're building a house in a hilly area, so you may not be able to use bricks there. So there might be specific local requirements for that particular area and products that suit that particular area. And the third is national procurement policies. Fourth is adequate distribution facilities. So if there is a good chain of distribution in the geographic market, there is ease of distribution of goods. So because a customer would be able to obtain a product from a faraway place without any problems. And next is transport costs. So if the transport costs between two areas are high, products from one area cannot be easily sold in another area owing to high transport costs. And language. So language also plays an important role in defining the geographic market. So say we're availing the services of the dish. So even when we call the customer helpline, if we met with someone who's speaking Hindi, we're not able to effectively communicate our problems if you don't know Hindi or you can't communicate in Hindi. So even language plays an important role in defining the relevant geographic market, because if a Tamil customer care provider will be able to give us a better service rather than Hindi speaking service provider. So then is consumer preference. Consumer may prefer the products of one area, one geographical area to another geographical area. That is also taken into consideration. And if there is a need to secure regular supplies from a particular area, so you can take a common grocery store. If you take Nilgiris, if there is a need for, you will pick a place that is closer to you. That is Nilgiris, Nilgiris Adyar. Suppose I'm living in Adyar, I will pick a Nilgiris that is closer to me. So because it gives me a regular supply, so I can go there and buy my products whenever I want to. And a need for rapid after-sale services. So after-sale services, suppose I'm buying a car and I need to give it for service after a year. So I would prefer to get my car repaired or serviced from a dealer who is located next to me. So all these factors must be considered before defining a relevant geographic market. So the CCI has to either takes all of these factors into consideration based on the case. It varies on a case-to-case basis, or any of these above factors. So I'd like to highlight two decisions of the Competition Commission of India. in determining relevant product and relevant geographical product market and relevant geographical market. So in Bel-Air Owners Association versus DLF India, the question was whether high-end apartments in a small geographical area, so the geographical area here was Gurgaon, would constitute a relevant market. So here the CCI, upon investigating into this case, it distinguished between high-end apartments and low-end apartments. And it stated that there are two different categories of customers who prefer high-end categories and low-end high-end apartments and low-end apartments. So that in itself constitutes separate market. Though it may come under the umbrella of an apartment, there are it can be classified into two. One is high-end and another is low-end. So there are different customers for both of these markets. So they differentiated between that. And the second case is East India Petroleum Private Limited versus South Asia Liquefied Petroleum Gas Company Private Limited. So in this case, this South Asia LPG company was the sole player in offering LPG terminaling services at the Visakhapatnam port. So this services offered by this particular company was not available in the adjacent ports, Nellore or Ennore. So the geographical area here was restricted to Vizag, and the relevant market here was market for upstream terminaling services at the Vizag market. So the competition was defined within that Vizag port area. So once you have determined what the relevant market is in your particular case, next is once the relevant market has been identified, the next step is to determine the dominance. So the test for dominance is twofold. One, it can either be the company with the position of strength allows that the position of strength of the company allows the company to operate independent of prevailing competitive forces. So competitive forces may be threat of substitutability, like I've mentioned, threat of new competitors entering into the market or existing market competitors on the market. So if it is able to operate independent of all these competitive forces, that is one test for dominance. And second is if the position of strength allows it to influence its competitors, consumers, or the relevant markets in its favors. So if it's able to tip the scales in its favor, that is also considered as dominant. That is also considered as the company having a dominant position in that relevant market. So Section 19 subclause 4 of the Competition Act 2002 determines the factors to be taken into account to test the dominance. So there is a list of factors, and I've categorized them into 3 categories. One is market share and market structure, and second is status of the competitors and consumers, and I've classified others as other factors. So this is basically how it is determined. So market share and market structure basically deal with the size of the company in terms of their market share, size, their resources, etc. Excuse me for a minute. There's a problem with my laptop. Just a second. Anyways, so market share and market share structure, it's defined based on the size of the company in terms of their market shares, the size of the company, and the resources that this company has. So status of competitors and consumers is determined on the what it means is even if an enterprise does not have a substantial share market, the size of the competitors can help in determining whether that particular company is having a dominant position in the market. So for example, there might be a company with just 20% market share or 20% share in the market. However, it might be able to influence the competitors. So that has been taken into consideration. So even if it is cancelled out on the basis of market, if it does not occupy sufficient market structure, if the size of its competitors or the size of its competitors or the customers that the company has is substantial, it is considered to be dominant with reference. It can be considered to be dominant in that relevant market. So Other factors, maybe there might be certain government agencies having monopoly, like if you take the railways, they might be enjoying monopoly, and there might be several entry barriers. So these are some other factors that influence in deciding the test for dominance. And it has also been shown in various cases of CCI that just market share should not be the only criteria in determining whether a particular company is dominant in a relevant market or not. So there might be, like I said, the example of there might be 60%, 40%. So that cannot be the sole criteria for determining whether a company is abusing its, if a company is in a dominant position. So then I'll move on to what is abuse of dominant. What is abuse of dominant position? So abuse of dominant position, how is it determined? So as we've gone through the process of how relevant market is determined, and whether a company is in that particular relevant market is in a dominant position. And finally, what is to be proven is if the particular company is in a dominant position, whether it is abusing that dominant position. So how it can be determined is by analyzing the behavior or conduct of that particular dominant enterprise. So section 4 subclause 2 gives the factors for determining abuse of dominance. So one is unfair or discriminatory condition in purchase or sale of goods. So I'll go back to the case of Belware Association versus DLF. So in this case, it was alleged that DLF was abusing its dominant position in the high-end apartment market. So in Gurgaon. So by imposing, it stated that the complainant stated that it was imposing unfair terms and conditions, whereby the builder could make unilateral changes to the plan of the building without the consent of the buyers. So these were, it had imposed certain unfair or discriminatory conditions. So second is unfair prices. So unfair prices could be either unfairly high prices or extremely low prices, or also known as predatory pricing. So both constitute abuse of dominant position. And however, there is an exception to unfair or discriminatory price in purchase or sale of goods or services, is when if there is a new company, new entrant in the market, in order to incentivize the customers or to attract more customers in its favor, it may use these predatory pricing or low pricing in order to attract consumers. So it can make attractive offers or reduce their prices, etc. In that case, only if it's a new entrant, that is an exception. So in Transparent Energy Systems versus TechPro Systems is a case where the CCI has listed out what would constitute as unfair price. One is if the prices of goods are at a very low level, and if the goal of that pricing is to drive out the competitors from the market. Third is if there is a significant planning to recover that particular loss that might cause, even if it is a low price market, if there's a plan in place to recover all those losses made once the market starts rising again, that will also constitute as unfair or discriminatory prices. And if the competitor has already been forced out by way of this unfairly high prices or predatory pricing. And the Supreme Court has also, in Uber India Systems versus the CCI, the Supreme Court has stated that predatory pricing itself can amount to proof of dominance. So a complainant must just, if there's abuse of dominance, if there is proof of predatory, just mere proof of predatory pricing can amount to proof of dominance. So the third factor to be taken into consideration is if the enterprise is indulging in limiting or restricting production of goods or provisions of services or market, or restricting technical or scientific development. So in this case, one example would be a company trying to create an artificial shortage in the market so that it can increase the prices of its products and sell their products at a higher price. Because the consumers also will have no other option if there is an artificial shortage in the market, but to go and buy that particular product, how much ever highly priced the product is. So and it can also restrict technical or scientific developments at the expense of its consumers. So there's a case between Bull's Machine and JCB. So what JCB did was it filed a copyright violation, patent violation before the High Court, stating that Bull's Machine was copying their product layout and stuff, layout, etc. And they also procured an injunction. And after the injunction, they withdrew the injunction. So Bull's Machine filed a case before the CCI, stating that they're abusing their dominant position in the market by abusing the due process of law to favor them. So that is also considered in limiting or restricting production of goods. Because in this case, they went and got an injunction order before the court. So this was also held to be an abuse of dominance. And the fourth factor is if it indulges in practice or practices resulting in denial of market access. So denial of market access can be complete denial of market access or partial denial of market access. So both are prohibited under the Act and will amount to abuse of dominance. So how can a company deny market access? So it can create entry barriers by imposing predatory pricing, and that it can there might be certain powerful corporations, like for example, say Reliance, who can influence the government to create and amend regulations. So that can also be that should also be taken into consideration. Even that would amount to denial of market access. So if they use that their dominant position in the market to prohibit new entrants from entering into the market, or increasing the barriers to trade by influencing their dominant, by using the dominant position, it amounts to abuse. So if they make conclusions of contracts subject to acceptance by other parties of supplementary or obligations, which by their nature or according to commercial usage have no connection with the subject of such contracts. So this can be simply summarized into tying and bundling. So tying of services happens, tying of products or services happens when a seller of a product requires you to buy a separate product for purchasing that particular product. So that is known as tying, where so it is subject to the acceptance of there's a supplementary obligation that is imposed on the buyer to buy another product from the same seller. So bundling amounts to when a product is sold as a package. So you can't buy it separately. When you buy one thing, you have to automatically get the other one. So I'll give a simple example. There was a case involving Jitendra Kumar and BMW. So Jitendra Kumar alleged that BMW was abusing its dominant position because it bundled the sale of a car. So if they bought a car from BMW, they had to compulsorily avail a special insurance policy. So under this, this special insurance policy was marketed in a way to show that they would get 4 free tire changes if they procure this special insurance policy. So this was concluded as a abuse of dominant position, because it unfairly imposed the obligation on the buyer to buy other products. So it was sold as a package. So that also amounts to abuse of dominant position. And buying a car and insurance, it may be mandatory, but in the case of that purchase, they were completely unrelated. So there was no connection with the subjects of the contracts. So finally, if it uses its dominant position in one relevant market to enter into or protect other relevant market, so if it extends its influence in one particular relevant market to set up a new company in another relevant market, or but even that would amount to abuse of dominance. So how is this abuse of dominance investigated by the CCI? So according to section 19, the CCI is empowered to inquire into companies that abuse their dominant position, either by suo motu, or they can receive complaints from private members, or references from the central government, state government, or any statutory regulatory authority, etc. And section 26 lays down the investigation procedure for CCI. So the first step in investigating the abuse of dominance is to see whether a prima facie case of abuse of dominance exists. So in CCI versus SAIL, the Supreme Court has held that it is mandatory for the CCI to see if there is a prima facie case of abuse of dominance. So if the answer is no, the matter will be closed and it can be communicated to the parties. So if the answer is yes, the Director General, who's constituted under the CCI, is the Director General is basically the investigating authority or the investigative wing of the CCI. So they will further investigate the complaints that it has received based on the complaint that has been received of abuse of dominance. So the Director General is also required to submit a report to the CCI, which will be forwarded to the parties. So it will analyze the merits of the case. It will go into detailed examinations of the evidence submitted by the parties to the party who has made the complaint. And if the DG finds that there is no abuse of dominance upon the completion of its investigation, the complainant is given an opportunity to challenge the findings. So the CCI will allow for rebuttals. And even after hearing these rebuttals, if the CCI is satisfied with the Director General's report, it will close the case. So, however, if there is an abuse of dominance, if it finds an abuse of dominance, it will hear both the parties. So both parties will be given an opportunity to raise their comments and objections. And based on these objections and comments raised, the CCI will pass certain orders. So going back to why it's important to determine what the CCI must do in order for it to constitute as prima facie case of abuse of dominance. So the CCI must simply look at what complaint it has received, and the complainant will attach several evidences or economic reports proving that this particular enterprise is abusing the dominant position. So they have to merely analyze what, based on the information that has been disclosed to the CCI. It is only based on that. So they don't, in the first stage, they don't have to appreciate the evidences. They don't have to go into detailed examinations of abuse of dominance to see whether it exists, or they don't have to go into the merits of the case. So prima facie, upon perusal and based on the complaint and the facts that have been, or facts and the evidence this is given by the complainant, if there's a prima facie case, it can direct the Director General to investigate the complaint. So what are the consequences of abuse of dominant position? So Section 4 subclause 1 of the Competition Act places a prohibition on abuse of dominant position by enterprises. So no enterprise or group shall abuse its dominant position. So based on the last step, after hearing the objections, after hearing the arguments of the parties of the case, the orders that the CCI can pass are, it can pass an injunction directing the parties to stop the abuse of dominance. It is also empowered to impose sanctions. So however, there's a ceiling to the limit for which the sanction can be imposed. It cannot exceed more than 10% of the average turnover rate for the past 3 financial years. That's the second. And it can direct compliance of its orders, directions, including payment of costs. So it can impose penalties on the companies that are indulging in abuse of dominant practices. And it is also empowered to direct the division of the company that is, or the enterprise that is abusing the domination, so that it does not continue the abuse of dominance. However, this particular provision is not used, is used very rarely. And it can also pass any other orders as it deems fit. So this is this is when it can direct what it can when it passes an order of division of enterprise, what all it can direct. It can direct transfer or vesting of property, rights, liabilities, or obligations. It can create or allot or surrender cancellations of any shares, stocks, or securities. So this is a comprehensive list of the factors that of what the CCI can pass orders based on. So Section 42 of the Competition Act also is a provision for if a company, even after passing of such orders by the CCI, if it does not follow or violates the orders, it is allowed to even imprison the particular company, the members of the company for a period of 3 years, or it can also impose additional penalties. So the Lakhna law, that according to me, in my view, when I was researching this particular area of law, what I felt was there is no set of particular guidelines or economic tests to determine relevant market. So the CCI, though it has been given a list of factors that it must consider before making a decision on, before defining a relevant market, there are no explicit tests to determine this relevant market. So a reason may be that why they're leaving it up to the CCI is in order to prevent cases where why it's given the authority to why it's left to them to decide the relevant market could be because there might be like cases where a company might be just holding 20% share in the market. However, it might be able to exert a greater influence in the market. So that may be one of the reasons, but I still feel like there must be a clear-cut economic test to determine, or they must define the limits for determining the relevant market. So one more area that I saw is the per se versus rule of reason approach. In most of the cases, the CCI has adopted a form-based approach or the per se approach. So per se is simply if the practice is acting as a barrier or restraint to trade, it is considered to be abuse of dominance, like in the case of the DLF case. So just mere existence of those discriminatory conditions was regarded as abuse of, was concluded as DLF abusing its dominant position. Whereas there might be a case, so my opinion is that it must also consider the rule of reason. So there might be companies abusing their dominant position. Whether this abuse of dominant position, whether it has an appreciable adverse effect on the market as such, must also be evaluated before deciding upon whether a company is indulging in a dominant position or not, whether it's abusing its dominant position or not. So my suggestions based on these lacunas, in my humble suggestions are, there must be an objective criteria to determine the relevant market. So since there are no guidelines or economic tests to determine the relevant market, they approach a common, the CCI like adopts a common approach. So there might be insufficient data or proper analysis of the data. So in my opinion, there must be an objective criteria for determining that dominant position in order to prevent violators from escaping due to lack of this appreciable adverse effect. So it must also adopt an effect-based approach. So in one such case, Faridabad Industries Association versus Adani Gas, well, in this case, just because there were certain conditions in the supply agreements which were unfair, it was regarded as the company is abusing its dominant position. So there must be sufficient evidence to also show that the dominant entity also has is also influencing the market in such a way that it has an appreciable adverse effect on competition as a whole. So these are my suggestions and my overview of abusive dominance question in the competition law. Thank you.